Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know we have a lot of content to go over and a lot of really great presentations from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also the Student Borrower Protection Center. Um, let's go ahead and get started. There's still going to be some people jumping in and some housekeeping items. First thing is this webinar is being recorded and the recorded video will be published onto the DFPI's YouTube channel. The link to our YouTube channel is right there. So if you have to leave at any time, you could come back later on today. We will have the entire video published onto our channel. Also, all of your microphones and video have been disabled for the remainder of this webinar. But if you do have a question, please feel free to submit it into the chat. I have several staff members who are going to be either trying to answer the questions or record the questions so that we can answer them at the end of the session. Okay, so first things first, I do want to give you an overview of what's going to happen today in today's agenda and today's webinar. I will be going over some of the new student loan updates. Then we'll have Selena Damian, our DFPI student loan ombudsperson, go over the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights, and the Student Borrower Protection Center will talk about the public service loan forgiveness, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will talk about they will actually demonstrate their new student loan debt repayment tool. And then after that, at the very end, we'll, if we have enough time, we'll go through as many questions as we can. Okay. So updates, this is kind of the big thing. A lot of things going on with student loans right now. The biggest one is that the student loan repayment pause has been extended to August 31st of this year. And so basically interest rates and repayments will restart until then. The other thing, and this is kind of a new one, is that defaulted and delinquent student loans will be placed back into good standing. That should happen sometime in September, around September, at least that's what I'm being told. What does that mean? Well, the most important thing to do is update your contact information with the U.S. Department of Education in case the U.S. Department of Education contacts you, especially if you have any kind of, if your loan is delinquent or in default. Also, it's actually great to just have your information updated with the U.S. Department of Education if they have any kind of new information that needs to be sent to you about your student loan. The other thing is, once your loan has been put back into good standing, it is incredibly important to try to keep it in good standing. So that might be, considering consolidating your loans or considering any of the income-driven repayment plans. You don't want to be put into good standing and then suddenly move back into default or delinquency because your information was not updated with the U.S. Department of Education, or you didn't know that this happened. So the other thing to do is there's a link we put there. It's a link to our webpage. It's our student borrower resources. It has a ton of great information, updates, a list of events that are happening. Also, at the very bottom, it's got an entire list of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, legal firms that that provide assistance and services to student loan borrowers. So if you go there and you need some kind of help to talk about income-driven repayments or consolidating your loans or how to get started on the public service loan forgiveness program, that's where to go. It's the best place to get started. Finally, a couple more updates. So this was in the news recently, I think about 2 weeks ago. If you know anything about total and permanent disability discharge, if you are permanently or have some kind of disability and you are certified through the Social Security Administration, your loan could have been discharged. So just check that out. Also, if you are not certified through the Social Security Administration, there is an application process to apply to have your student loan discharged. If you are, again, if you are total or permanent disability. Another thing that was thrown on my radar is interest rates for new undergraduate federal loans will increase in July. This is for new undergraduate federal loans if you're considering to consolidate your loans into something new. From what I understand, your interest rates at the end of August, of course, would be an average of what you currently pay for interest rates. And then the last piece is the last update is the federal family education loans are now eligible for the payment pause and interest waiver. Before they were not, and now they are. So manage that if you, and look into that. Okay, so with that, those are kind of the new updates to the student loans. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Selena Damian, the DFPI's student loan ombudsperson.
Thank you, Ku. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I will be speaking to you about the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights. My name is Selena Damian. As Ku said, I am the Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson here at DFPI. Next. First, I want to briefly go over some of DFPI's responsibilities as California's Consumer Protection Agency. Some of our responsibilities include to license and examine companies of financial products to ensure compliance. We investigate consumer complaints. We take legal action when companies are not in compliance. We conduct education and outreach to enhance consumer awareness and protect consumers from fraud and abuse. Next, please. So let's talk about student loan debt. So according to the Department of Education, the Institute of College Access and Success and Education Data.org, in the United States, student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt category after mortgages. As of Friday, April 22nd, student loan debt is at almost 1.9 trillion. In California, there are over 3.8 million borrowers owing nearly $147 billion in student loans. In 2019 and 2020, 46% of California college graduates had student loan debt, and of those, 51.7% of borrowers are under the age of 35. And the average debt load of a California borrower is $37,084. And although the amount may not seem substantial, the student loan system has made it very difficult for students to pay down the debt, resulting in loan balances that in many cases greatly exceed the original amount borrowed. Next, please. So two important terms that a student borrower should know. A lender. So the lender is a company or the organization lending you the money. They originate the loan, they fund, and they set the terms of your loan. So that could be the Department of Education, your school, or a private bank. The student loan servicer. So the servicer is the company that tracks your loans while you are in school. They collect and process your loan payments. They respond to borrower inquiries and information requests. They accept applications and process changes in repayment plans, deferments, forbearances, or other activities to prevent default, and they maintain the loan records. So basically, the student loan servicers are the main point of contact for the borrowers. Next. So let's review some of the protections that are already in place for federal student borrowers. So a borrower has the right to receive written information with loan details, loan obligations, and information on borrower rights and responsibilities. They have a right to receive a copy of the master promissory note either before or at the time the loan is disbursed. A borrower has the right to switch a repayment plan at any time. They can prepay the loan in whole or in part or at any time without penalty. They can receive 0.25% reduction in interest rate if they set up automatic payments. They can apply for forbearance or deferment for certain defined periods if they cannot make payments. And a borrower can receive loan cancellation if they meet certain qualifications. Next, please. So despite these federal protections in place, student loan debt continued to grow, balances ballooned, and borrowers received no clear guidance or relief. It became apparent that borrowers did not have the safeguards to help them get out of debt. They were faced with navigating a complex system plagued with predatory practices. Servicers were found to routinely lose paperwork, misapply payments, be unresponsive, provide inaccurate information, and even steer borrowers into repayment options that added to the overall cost of their loans. These unfair and deceptive practices caused borrowers to slide towards default. Next. So in 2019, the Student Borrower Bill of Rights was introduced by Assembly Member Mark Stone as Assembly Bill 376. It became effective January 1st of 2021, and it was supported by a coalition of about 70 civil rights, higher education, and consumer advocacy organizations. The Bill of Rights applies to student loan servicers doing business in California, including state licensed servicers, as well as banks doing servicing. It applies to borrowers with both federal and private loans, and it can be found in the Civil Code starting at section 1788.100. And California is only one of 13 states that has established this type of advanced legislation for student borrower protection. Next slide, please. So chapters 1 and 2 of the Bill of Rights set industry standard and substantive protections. To start with, it prohibits abusive acts or practices by the servicers. It states that a servicer may not take unreasonable advantage of a borrower's lack of understanding. It prohibits engaging in an unfair or deceptive practice or misrepresent or omit material information. It establishes special protections for military borrowers, borrowers working in public service, older borrowers, and those with disabilities. The Bill of Rights establishes the rules of the road or standard practices that servicers must follow. These rules include that servicers must process student loan payments in a timely fashion. Payments that are received before 11:59 p.m. on the date payment is due should be marked as on time. Overpayments must be allocated in a manner that reduce the total cost of the student loan, including principal balance, interest, and fees. Partial payments must be allocated in a manner that minimize late fees and negative credit reporting. Servicers must minimize their fees, and fees are capped at 6% of the amount past due. Servicers must ensure that they timely and correctly process income-driven repayment applications and other paperwork for federal student loan benefits. Next, please. Servicers must ensure that their customer service personnel have appropriate training about handling paperwork, have access to IDR plans, income-driven repayment plans, and other forms to access benefits and protections for federal student loans. Servicers must improve their record keeping and keep their records up to date so borrowers can manage their payments appropriately. Servicers must maintain records for a minimum of 3 years after the loan is paid, assigned to collections, or if the account has been transferred. Servicers must respond to disputes and other requests for information from borrowers, either orally or in writing. This is called the qualified written request, and the servicer must respond to the written request within 30 business days. Next, please. Servicers must maintain policies and procedures to permit a borrower who is dissatisfied with the outcome of their written request to escalate the concern to a supervisor. A servicer must protect a borrower from any negative consequences that are directly related to the issue in the qualified written statement or stemming from a sale, assignment, transfer, system conversion, or payments made to the original servicer in case of a transfer. These negative consequences could include negative credit reporting, imposing late fees, loss or denial of eligibility for any benefit or protection under federal law or included in the loan contract. If a student loan is transferred, the servicer must notify the borrower of the new servicer 15 days before the borrower is required to send in a payment. The account information must be transferred to the new servicer within 45 days of the sale, And this is very important right now because millions of loans were transferred or in the process or are in the process of being transferred since some of the biggest servicers ended their contract with Department of Education. Servicers must provide specialized training for any customer service personnel that advises military borrowers, borrowers working in public service, older borrowers, and those with disability. Chapters 3 and 4 of the Bill of Rights are related to enforcement, and they establish perhaps one of the most important borrower rights. A borrower has the right to take legal action against their servicer if the servicer fails to comply with any of the laws in the Bill of Rights. This is called a private right of action, and it allows borrowers to sue and collect damages and restitution if their rights have been violated. It allows for treble damages if it can be shown a student loan servicer engaged in conduct that substantially interfered with the borrower's right to an alternative payment arrangement, loan forgiveness, cancellation, or discharge, or any other benefit under the promissory note or Higher Education Act. And lastly, Chapter 4 also establishes the California Student Loan Ombudsperson position, my position. As the Ombudsperson, essentially, I am the advocate for student borrowers. My duties include to receive and review complaints from student loan borrowers and route to the appropriate entity, compile and analyze data on the number of student loan borrowers, provide information to the public, agencies, legislators, and others regarding the problems and concerns of student loan borrowers, analyze and monitor the development and implementation of federal and state laws, rules, regulations, and policies relating to student loan borrowers, and report this information to the legislature once a year. Next, please. So now that we have discussed borrower rights, let's discuss your responsibilities as a borrower. You and your cosigner are responsible for the repayment of your loan regardless of whether you graduate from college or are dissatisfied with the education. You are responsible for knowing when your loan repayment begins and your required payment amount. You are responsible for notifying your loan servicer of any change to your address. You are responsible for notifying your loan servicer and school if your name or contact information changes, if you transfer or withdraw from school after a change in employment, or any change that could impact your loan. Also, some tips for student borrowers: make sure you know who your student servicer is. If you don't know who your servicer is and you have a federal loan, you can go to the studentaid.gov website, create an account if you haven't already done so, and they can provide you with information on your loan and your servicer. Make sure you give your servicer specific instructions on how to allocate extra payments or overpayments. Make sure you know and you understand your rights. Keep copies of all documents. Keep in contact with your servicer. And one thing that we don't commonly think about, but steer clear of debt relief scams. You may be searching for information, debt relief, or assistance with your student loans, and scammers take advantage of that. Just remember, scammers promise fast loan forgiveness. They make sure to never pay an upfront fee or any fee if possible. Scammers can fake a government seal, and do not share your FSA login information with anyone. Next, please. If you are experiencing problems with your student loan servicer, or if your student loan servicer has acted unlawfully, you can log on to our webpage at dfpi.ca.gov. There you will find information on filing a complaint, the complaint link, and you can also find a link to the Student Borrower Bill of Rights, as well as other student-related protections. My email is on the screen in case you have any questions regarding your student loan. If you're not sure whether or not to file a complaint, you can email our Ask DFPI email if you have just general questions about what we do or other services, or you can always call us at 866-275-2677.
Thank you, Selena.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cohen. Thank you, everyone.
That's some really great and critical information. It's absolutely important that every student loan borrower understands, especially in California, their rights. And just a question, Selena, if a borrower feels like their rights have been violated, who should they contact?
They can file a complaint through our website, but if they're not sure if they want to just check or have a question about filing the complaint, then they can give me a call. Email me, I'm sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Selena.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have the Student Borrower Protection Center. Amy at the Student Borrower Protection Center. She's going to be talking about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Amy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Amy Asalada. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center, and we're a national nonprofit policy organization focused solely on alleviating the burden of student debt in the country. And we do this through a mix of advocacy, policymaking, and litigation strategy to rein in industry abuses, protect borrowers' rights, and advance economic opportunity for the next generation of students. And so first, I'll just briefly review the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program generally, and then I'll go over the recent changes to the program under the current waiver period. Next, please. Thank you. So Congress created the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program in 2007 to help public service workers who were struggling with student loan debt and to make sure that future students wouldn't be deterred from entering the public service because of their student loan balances. And to put it simply, PSLF is the promise that if a borrower works in public service and makes payments for 10 years, the remainder of their debts will be forgiven. But more than simply working in public service for 10 years, there are normally 4 specific criteria. So first, you need to have a direct loan. That's one of several federal loan types. Second, you need to be in the correct repayment plan, which for the program is typically an income-driven repayment plan or an IDR plan. Third, you need to work in the public service field. And then finally, you need to make 120 qualifying payments, which is 10 years worth of payments. Next, please. So there were a lot of issues with the PSLF program, and from the beginning, many borrowers were blocked out of the program because of its bureaucratic program criteria. So to address this, last fall, the Department of Education issued a time-limited waiver that would retroactively grant credit towards forgiveness for borrowers. And so we'll talk about some of the changes under the current waiver period and how you can benefit from it. Essentially, what the department's waiver does is give public service workers credit towards loan forgiveness, regardless of what type of federal student loan they have, for any period of time since October 1st, 2007, when the program began, and as long as they were in qualifying public service employment and their loan wasn't in default, deferment, or forbearance. So even for months in which borrowers did not actively make a payment, as long as their loan was in repayment status, they can receive credit. And these credits will be retroactive, so borrowers can receive past credit for past payments that were previously ineligible. So in short, for any months since October 1st, 2007, that a borrower had any type of federal loan, worked in qualifying public service, was not in default, that borrower can receive credit toward the 120 months required for loan forgiveness under PSLF. Now, as with PSLF, the income-driven repayment program has not lived up to its promises of delivering debt relief. And just last week, the Department of Education announced that it would review the IDR process and count some periods of forbearance and deferment before 2013. This means that periods in which borrowers had up to 12 consecutive months or over 36 cumulative months, some cases, those times of forbearance or deferment will count towards the 120 credits needed for forgiveness. We expect additional details from the Department of Ed in the coming weeks, and we'll provide updates. And the good news is that this will only mean more qualifying payments for some borrowers. No one will lose qualifying payments as a result of this reconsideration that was just announced last week. Next, please. Thank you. So however, this waiver isn't completely automatic. So normally public service loan forgiveness requires that borrowers have a specific loan type, direct loans, as I mentioned. And although the waiver allows borrowers with any loan type to get credit, those without direct loans will have to take some steps to convert their loans into direct loans through a process called consolidation. Though you still will get time and credit for the time before the conversion. And almost all borrowers, regardless of loan types, will have to certify with the Department of Education any periods of qualifying public service work since October 1st, 2007. Importantly, the department's waiver only lasts until October 31st, 2022. So this means that any borrower who must change their loan type through consolidation or certify their public service work with the department must do so before this date of October 31st, 2022. So this doesn't mean that everyone will receive their new credit towards loan forgiveness by this deadline, just that the paperwork has to be completed. And credits will be given on a rolling basis, and the department might take more time beyond this deadline of October 31st, 2022 to process everyone. Although if you get credits from the waiver, those are permanent. So if you didn't receive enough to meet the 120 credit requirement, you can continue to accrue more credits after this deadline of October 31st, adding to those that you received during the waiver. And so with that in mind, there are 3 things that all public service workers with federal student loans should do. So let's review them. So to figure out how this special waiver applies to you and what steps you individually need to take, every borrower should do 3 things. We'll talk about each, but briefly they are to confirm your past and present employers are qualifying public service employers, determine your loan types and consolidate if necessary, and certify your employment with the Department of Education. So first, confirm that you have a qualifying employer. Nothing about this requirement changed during the waiver. You still need to work in public service, except that for during the waiver period, you don't need to still be employed at the time that you apply for forgiveness after your 120 payments. And remember that qualifying employers include any government employer, so that includes federal, state, local, and tribal governments, any nonprofits that have a 501c3 tax-exempt status. Certain other nonprofits also qualify. However, unions and political organizations do not. So any organization with whose tax-exempt status is C4 will not be eligible for PSLF, nor are any for-profit employers eligible. And if you aren't sure whether your employer qualifies as a public service employer for PSLF, the Department of Education maintains a list at this website at studentaid.gov that you can search. It's important to note, though, that this list isn't necessarily exhaustive. So if your employer doesn't appear, but you still believe that you're in qualifying public service, you can proceed with the PSLF process. And you can access this list by using the PSLF help tool, which is available at this website. The employer database is the first step in the help tool, so you can quickly access it to check your past and present employer status. Okay, step 2. So what type of federal loans do you have? The 3 major loan types that most folks today have are direct loans, federal family education loans, sometimes called FFEL loans, and Perkins loans. For public service workers to get credit, to get loan forgiveness for their FFEL or Perkins loans under the PSLF waiver, they will have to consolidate their loans into direct loans. And consolidation is like a refinancing process with the Department of Education. Remember what's special about the waiver is that normally when you consolidated your loans, you lost any past credit towards forgiveness, but during the waiver, you can keep that past credit and apply it to the new consolidated loan. The final step that all public service workers with federal student loans should take is certifying their qualifying employment with the Department of Education. Remember that qualifying employers are any level of government, 501c3 nonprofit employers, and certain other nonprofit employers. The form to do this is called the PSLF form, but it was previously called an Employment Certification Form, or ECF. Borrowers should certify their employment using the PSLF help tool, which is the same tool that you can use to confirm that your past and present employers qualify you for PSLF. And that tool will generate the forms that you need for you, which you will then have to have any employer that you are claiming as a qualifying public service employer sign. So what's the process for getting forgiveness? This is the general process, but it applies to the waiver as well. FIA operating as Fed Loan Servicing is currently the exclusive servicer for public service loan forgiveness. So borrowers seeking PSLF need to send the PSLF form to FIA, which will do a preliminary review of loan eligibility. And if you have a qualifying loan, your loan will then be transferred to FIA for servicing, at which point it will run through the other criteria such as employment and qualifying payments. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of problems with people finding out too late in the game that they thought they qualified, but that something had gone wrong. So for this reason, we advise that you submit a form as soon as you're interested in PSLF. And then you also do it each time, or I'm sorry, every year until you do it again every year until you qualify for forgiveness, and then do it each time that you change public service employers. You don't have to do this. You could document everything after your 10 years of service, but this way you have a great chance of catching any issues that might arise and dealing with them as soon as they happen. The Department of Education has stated that they are continuing to review PSLF cases on a rolling basis. So there is no exact timeline for when you will receive notification from them. You may have also read that FedLoan is ending its contract with the department. This is true, and it was recently announced that another company is taking over. At this point, it's still okay to have everything go to FedLoan because the transfer won't happen for a little while. And if anyone has to have their account transferred, the companies can handle it. However, you should keep a copy of all of your own records because sometimes things get lost from one company to another. Okay, so let's just review some important takeaways. So remember that credit will be given for months during which any loan type was in repayment and not in default, and that because of the announcement last week, some periods of forbearance and deferment may count prior to 2013. The deadline to apply is October 31st, 2022 to consolidate your loans if necessary and submit PSLF forms for your employment. Remember to follow the steps in this presentation. So confirm that your past and present employers are eligible using the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov. Confirm your loan types, and if they aren't direct, consolidate them into direct loans. And then submit PSLF forms for any qualifying employer that you are seeking credit for since that date of October 1st, 2007. And then file a complaint if you experience any issues, either with the California Ombudsperson or with the Federal Student Aid Ombudsperson. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you, Amy. I know a lot of people are super interested in the public service loan forgiveness program. One of the indicators is I'm looking at the chat and it just shot up how many people were asking questions. So I do want to remind you that we won't be able to answer questions right in the middle of the presentation. We're going to be holding all the questions till the end, and we might not have time to answer all your questions, but we're going to do as best as we can to answer the most frequently asked questions. And also next month, and on May 31st, around the same time, noon, we will be holding another webinar. It'll be an hour long. It's going to be dedicated just for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's going to be a workshop. Amy will be there from the Student Borrower Protection Center. I'm also going to be inviting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to help, and we're going to do as much as we can to help walk you through the process. It's going to be kind of a workshop. So again, thank you, Amy. I see those hands being raised. I'm not going to answer them right now. We will save them till the end of the presentation, because right now, next up we have Kate with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And go ahead, Kate.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be chatting with you in the chat. I'm going to stay off video just because I have not great internet and I don't want to freeze up on you. Today, I am going to be sharing a tool that actually might help with some of the questions that are in the chat. And next slide, please. So before I get started, I have to give you the standard disclaimer. I am making this presentation on behalf of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a federal regulatory agency. However, it does not constitute any kind of legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the Bureau, which is a good thing because I'm not a lawyer and wouldn't be qualified to give you that advice anyway. Any opinions or views that I state are, of course, just belong to me, and the Bureau is not responsible for them. And if you have access to this later, it was, of course, being used in support of a very lively discussion in the chat and elsewhere, and it's not going to express the entirety of that discussion. Next slide, please. If you're not familiar with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also referred to commonly as the CFPB, that would not be unusual. A lot of people haven't heard of us, but we are a 21st century agency that implements and enforces federal consumer financial law. That means anything that just ordinary people do with their money, from bank accounts to credit cards, student loans, auto loans, mortgages, all that stuff. We have regulatory purview, and we also have an educational mission, which is the side of the bureau that I work on. And we are working to ensure that markets for these consumer financial products are fair, transparent, and competitive. Transparent meaning that you have the same access to information as the customer and the consumer that the companies do. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me get into our new tool, which is actually a remake of an old tool. I'm going to share my screen so that I can show it to you. Hopefully that's working now. Okay, so this lives on our website, consumerfinance.gov, where we have all kinds of tools. Like I said, every topic, every possible thing that you can do with your money, we have information about it available to you. And I'll go into a little bit more about our general resources later, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to find stuff here. Okay, so this new tool is, we've titled it Find Advice for Your Student Loans. And essentially we are trying to, as you can see in the chat, right, there's a ton of information out there, and it all depends on what type of loan you have and what's your goal and all this stuff. But you know, the amount of information out there is just like an ocean's worth. So we are trying to, with this tool, based on a couple questions that you answer, take you to the correct part of the ocean, so to speak, so you're getting the information that is really relevant to you. So the first question we ask you here are kind of what's broadly the situation that you are in. Are you struggling with your payments? Are you in default? Has your loan been sent to collections? Are you just starting out with your loans and you want to make sure that you're getting off on the right foot? Or are you kind of on cruise control? You've been able to make your payments and you just want to make sure that you're doing things as intelligently and as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to click here. Oops, sorry about that. That I'm struggling. And then the next question that we'll ask you is what type of loans that you have, because as you may have noticed in the chat and the previous parts of this presentation, the type of loan that you have can have a big impact on what your options are. So we cover federal loans, federal Parent Plus loans, because they do have some different options. And then private education loans, that's basically anything that's not a federal loan. You could get it from a bank, a credit union. Sometimes schools offer these loans, sometimes nonprofits, states will offer them occasionally. And it can be a little bit confusing because, for instance, someone was asking me about Nelnet in the chat, or Navient. And some of these players are both federal loan servicers, meaning that they handle your payments and you go to their website and they answer your questions when you have a phone call. But that's for your federal loan, but then they also issue private loans. So it can be a little bit confusing to know what you actually have. And then we also have a section for people who have a combination, right? A lot of people have both federal and private education loans because the federal amount wasn't enough. And so they took out private as well. As I mentioned, it's super common to not be totally confident what type of loans you actually have. So we have some options here too if you're not quite sure what your situation is. Studentaid.gov will list all of your federal loans. And then you can always get a free credit report at annualcreditreport.com. And that will list all of your loans and hopefully make it easier for you to figure out if you have any private student loans. Okay, so with all that preamble, let me go ahead and actually open this up so you can see what it looks like. So we're going to pretend that we have federal student loans and we are struggling to make our payments. And we try to keep it really concise so that you can see pretty quickly at a glance what your options are. There's going to be a first step here, which is kind of like the thing you should do immediately. In this case, that would be looking into income-driven repayment, which Amy was just talking about. The education department has a great loan simulator tool that will help you estimate what your payment will actually be on various plans. And then we give you a little bit more information here about how IDR works. And then we also have some follow-up, some additional information that once you've kind of done the most important steps, some other things for you to consider. One of those, the PSLF that she just mentioned, and let's see, I'm going to go back. So it also says if you have another type of loan, you can go back to the beginning. And there were a lot of questions in the chat about Parent Plus. And so I wanted to show that one as well. Okay, so Parent Plus loans, like I said, are a little, they have different rules of the road, excuse me, than other federal loans do. So we have some information here about the ways that they are different, as well as some next steps to consider. And let's see, one thing I want to also show you, we also have a kind of a general advice page on managing student loans here. And I know there are a lot of questions about IDR. We have some more information here about the IDR, as well as for Parent Plus loans. As I mentioned in the chat, you have to consolidate in order to get onto IDR for Parent Plus. So I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritty here. I just wanted to mention those things because those questions were coming up in the chat, and because IDR is part of pursuing PSLF. All right, so that's basically it. That's the tool. It's just those two quick questions, and then hopefully the information it takes you to will be of help. And that's my bit. Can you, yep, so this is part of a larger section on our website called Paying for College. We also have a tool there called GradPath, Understand Your Financial Aid Offer, that will help people who are trying to decide where to go to school, what they can actually afford. So I just wanted to mention that in case you have anyone in your life who is going to be making that decision soon. Next slide, please. And there's the link to that tool. Next slide, please. We also have a podcast called Financial Intuition. It features interviews with students as well as financial aid professionals and financial coaches, other people who study and follow student loan issues. So that might be of help to you. Next slide, please. And then we have a bunch of other resources as well. We have a mailing list where we can notify you about webinars and new materials. We have a whole bunch of informational resources. You can also get free hard copies of that material, of a lot of these materials. And we have a huge FAQ bank called Ask CFPB on a variety of topics. And we try to offer resources in multiple languages. We're working continuously to add more languages. Next slide, please. And that's it. Our mailing address is students@cfpb.gov. And you can also reach out there if you have any questions or want to join our mailing list. I can help you do that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Fantastic tool developed by the CFPB. I know I had played around with the earlier version of the tool, and it was still very helpful. If you do, as a student loan borrower, if you do need assistance, that's kind of a really great place to start as well. Okay, so now it's 12:47 here. Time for questions, and there were a lot of questions. I was just kind of watching the chat, and it's a little bit all over the place. So let me see here. Here's a question. And by the way, any of the presenters here, you're welcome to answer this question if you can. If we can't answer this question, we'll answer it offline. If you live in another state when you went to college and took out loans, but you now live in California, does the student loan protect? Does the California student loan programs apply to you? So I'm assuming they mean the California Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights. Selena, did you want to answer that one? No. So again, the question is, if you live in another states when you went to college and took out loans, but now you live in California, does the California student loan programs apply to you? In terms of programs, a lot of these programs are federal programs. So like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness program, that's federal program. IDRs are all federal, so you should be able to apply for those pretty easily. Consolidating your loan, that's a federal thing. But in terms of the California Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights, I think as a California resident, it also applies. I'm not 100% sure, but I do have a couple of subject matter experts on my team, and we'll help answer that one directly. Okay, next question. Does commercially held federal family education loan program loans also qualify for the payment pause and interest waiver? Any of my panelists want to answer that one? So does commercially held federal family education loans also qualify for payment pause and interest waiver? So this one, go ahead.
Yeah, I can help with this. So yes, they can be covered as long as they are consolidated. So if you consolidate your commercially held FFEL loans, then they will be eligible, both for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, the IDR announcement that was made last week. So changes to the account adjustments that will happen. So the key is consolidating your loans if you have commercially held FFEL and want to take advantage of the payment pause and some of these other options.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, next question. Does the DFPI provide support for borrower defense cases in regards to schools that committed fraud? I don't know if our panelists here can answer that. We do have part of my staff, part of the DFPI, student loan servicer program. We do license and regulate the servicers. Selena, did you want to answer?
Yes, you can go ahead and contact me. Basically, we will refer that to, it's either the Department of Education, or we can also put you in touch with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, depending on the situation.
Okay, thank you, Selena.
You're welcome.
Here's another one. Are loans that have been in IDR status for over 20 to 25 years now eligible for forgiveness? Are servicers supposed to let you know how many years you've been in IDR repayment status? It's an interesting question.
So I can help with this one, and if anyone else wants to chime in, that would be great. But so this is exactly what we're seeking more guidance on from the Department of Education. It is supposed to be that the account adjustments will be automatic, and so people who have been in IDR plans for 20 to 25 years, yes, you are supposed to only be in those programs for 20 to 25 years, and the balance will be forgiven. But so this is what the importance of the announcement last week, that they are reviewing all accounts and making sure that people who have been in repayment for that long will get forgiveness. And so we are still awaiting a lot of guidance on what that will actually look like. But yes, that is what the announcement was about. And stay tuned. So I imagine those updates will be coming very soon.
Thank you, Amy. Selena, I'm going to circle back to another question we had earlier. So someone asked that they lived in another state when they went to college and took out loans, but now they live in California. does the student loan borrower, the California student loan borrower rights apply to them?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, it does. So if
Okay.
they have any issues, they could get in touch with us. But yes,
Okay, fantastic.
thank you.
Here's another one. Let's see. If you consolidate your loans, will it invalidate past credit towards forgiveness? And I think Amy had talked about this already. I do not believe it will. It used to, but I don't think that'll happen anymore. Amy, clarify?
That's right. So this was one of the problems with the original program as it was created. Before, when you consolidated your loans, you lost any past credit towards forgiveness, but under the special waiver period that exists only until October 31st, 2022, if you consolidate your loans, you will keep all of that past credit towards forgiveness. Yeah, so thanks.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. So this question, this person asked, they were deployed at some point, and their loans were in forbearance for about a year while they were deployed. Since they were deployed full time with the Army, is their loans, not loans, I'm sorry, is that time, is that, I'm sorry, it's kind of the question's all over the place. So they were deployed for a year working for the U.S. Army, and so during that time in forbearance, they weren't making payments. Are those months qualifying towards public service loan forgiveness?
Yes. So when we talk about forbearances, they're treated differently than military forbearances. So any time spent in military forbearances count towards PSLF, while other periods of like voluntary forbearance are not counted the same way. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. Hold on a second. Here is another question. How do we find out how many qualifying payments we have, especially when you have consolidated the original loan? Okay.
You can just stay on camera too. So if you already have Fed Loan as your servicer, and it sounds like you do since you already consolidated your loan. So if you already have a direct loan and your servicer is Fed Loan, you should be able to look on the dashboard on the servicer website to see how many qualifying payments you have so far. If you haven't consolidated yet and you haven't applied for PSLF yet, and you're looking to do that during this current waiver period, again, that will happen on a rolling basis, and the Department of Education does those in batches. So there's no exact timeline for when that might happen, but just stay vigilant and watch your account to make sure that you receive notifications from them.
Great. Two more for you, Amy. There's a lot of questions about the public service loan forgiveness program. Number one, is it true that loans can be forgiven if they are older than 20 years?
So yes, in theory, income-driven repayment plans were, created to respond to this. So if you're in an income-driven repayment plan, no loan should be in existence for more than 20 or 25 years, depending on the IDR plan that you're in. And so again, this is why the announcement last week is so important, because there's this one-time audit that the Department of Education will do on all accounts to make sure that borrowers are actually benefiting from that period of 20 to 25 years where your loans should be forgiven afterward.
Okay. One more for you. If you consolidated your loan once, are they precluded from being consolidated again? So I think they're asking is if they consolidated their loan already, and so maybe some time ago, and they need to consolidate more, maybe they went and got another degree. Can you consolidate it again?
I'm actually not sure. If anyone else on the panel would like to answer that question, that would be great.
Wait, can you say the question again? Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat and listen at the same time, and I'm failing.
It's okay. There's a lot of chat questions. So it's an interesting question. If you consolidated your loan once, are your loans precluded from being consolidated again? So my assumption here is no. Okay.
No, as long as you have as long as you still have multiple loans, right? So if you have a single consolidation loan and that's your only loan, you cannot consolidate the single consolidation loan, because consolidation requires multiple loans to be brought into one. But for instance, if you have two consolidation loans, or if you have a consolidation loan and then another loan, you can consolidate them. And there are times when that makes sense to do that. I think the PSLF waiver perhaps is one of those times, actually, because of that retroactive credit stuff, if you're pursuing that. The one warning that we tend to give, though, is that you want to think very hard before consolidating Parent Plus loans with any other type of federal loan. Because Parent Plus loans have a lot more rules applied to them. They don't qualify for they only qualify for one IDR plan, and it's the least generous IDR plan. And they just get less preferential treatment by the legislation. So once you consolidate with a Parent Plus loan, it's kind of all Parent Plus flavor. It's all treated as Parent Plus going forward. So that's the one thing you want to be really careful about is not combining Parent Plus with other types of debt generally. Since we're talking about consolidation, someone just asked, will consolidating loans increase the interest rate? It can slightly, because what they do is a weighted average of your interest rates on your different loans, and then they round to the nearest, is it the nearest eighth of a percent? So it can end up going up very slightly. Amy, I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make one other note on Parent Plus loans. So just to repeat, Parent Plus loans generally do qualify you for PSLF. However, they were excluded from the current waiver period. But if you do have, the concerns that Kate mentioned were true about the IDR plans and Parent Plus loans. But if you do have loans of your own and Parent Plus loans, you could consolidate them together to benefit from the current waiver period if that's something that you're looking to do. So I just wanted to state that as well.
Wow, that's actually really interesting. I never thought about that before, but thank you for that information. Also, thank you for the question. One last one. I know we're right at the hour, and I think this one might be for you, Kate. It's what age is considered older borrowers? I think it was in one of your slides. Older borrowers?
Oh, I don't think it was in my slide.
Was it you or was it?
May have been in my slide, and I don't have a number for you, but I can get that for you.
Okay, all good. Thank you, Selena. Okay, so we're right at the hour. The last thing I'd like to do is just to remind everyone, we do have a web page. There's the link right there on the screen. If you have any, it's basically a collection of a lot of great resources for you. At the very bottom, again, is a list of government agencies, nonprofits, legal firms, doing pro bono work and providing services and assistance to student loan borrowers. If you need any kind of help, that's one of the best places to get started. Also, be sure to subscribe to the DFPI. We have a newsletter. We email out consumer alerts and all sorts of great information. And finally, if you do have any questions, please feel free to email us. Our email address is right there, outreach@dfpi.ca.gov. If we cannot answer your question, we will forward those questions on to our subject matter experts and our community network partners. Finally, the next webinar coming up is on May 1st at noon. It'll be a public service loan forgiveness workshop. I'm going to try to walk everyone through the entire public service loan program. And thank you. It's the hour. Thank you for joining. We had a great panel, and we also had a lot of really great questions. Please take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.